Sooners closing in on a top target for the 2025 recruiting cycle, and a couple guys set their official visits coming up on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Go get your adventure going with Nissan's great line of vehicles. You can go check out the Armada, the Pathfinder, or the Rogue, and go find your next big adventure. Go check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Homer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also check out the show at Locked On Sooners. And all of our segments on recruiting here on the Locked On Network are brought to you by LinkedIn. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. And the top news of the day on the recruiting front is Nate Roberts, one of the top tight ends in the 2025 recruiting cycle, cut his list down to 5 teams, including the Oklahoma Sooners, Ohio State Buckeyes, Oregon Ducks, Ole Miss Rebels, and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, obviously, the Washington, Oklahoma native has some ties to the Sooners, has been recruited by Joe John Finley and the Sooners staff for some time, but his brother, Jake Roberts, now is a Sooner. So there's a little bit more connection there. But Oklahoma has done a great job recruiting the state of Oklahoma for the 2025 cycle. And if they were able to land a Nate Roberts, a really, really talented tight end prospect, that would just give them another feather in their cap as they recruit the Sooner State in this next recruiting cycle.
It'd be huge if they can land that commitment at some point from Nate Roberts. Obviously, what he was initially committed to Notre Dame, and then there's been some serious interest, and some people feel like Ohio State is still the leader for Nate Roberts, but you've got the brother on campus connection now, though. Jake Roberts, right, set to play his final season this coming year in Norman, but look, that offers a chance for some familiarity. You know, Jake Roberts, of course, played high school football at Norman North, so the family has grown up here, right? Nate plays at Washington, which is just outside of Norman. So they live here. They're from here. That gives Oklahoma, better than a puncher's chance. Now you're in the top 5 here for an elite 2025 tight end, but there is probably a little bit of ground to be made up here. But what it could mean for Oklahoma, you think about Devon Mitchell in the class beforehand, and then maybe you stack up and get Nate Roberts here. John, it would be back-to-back big-time gets at tight end for Oklahoma, for Seth Luttrell, for Joe John Finley. It would be a monster get, and obviously, as long as you're in that top 5, you at least have a chance to make a couple of final pitches to maybe swing the recruitment.
It's one of the kind of more marquee recruiting battles that Oklahoma will be in the 2025 cycle. And it's an important one because tight end has been a position for the last several years that really has underwhelmed. Braden Willis had a great, year back in 2022, but then 2023, really, you didn't get much. And a lot of it is, okay, your tight end recruiting, the development, some injuries to some guys that you've had on campus. It hasn't quite taken hold over the last couple of years, especially under, Brent Venables and, with the offensive coordinator changes that we've seen. But you've got to find a way to start building that back up. We saw with Georgia and Brock Bowers just how much of a game changer it can be to have an elite tight end. And we hope we've got the next guy in Davin Mitchell, dude that's already 6'3", 255 as a 17-year-old freshman, early enrollee. If they can get Nate Roberts and stack that together to where you have, Davin Mitchell, Nate Roberts, and you continue to build up Cade McIntyre, Caden Helms, you're looking a whole lot better at the tight end position, not just for 2024, but 2025, 26, 27, where you're feeling really, really good about the position. And that's just going to help your quarterback. There's nothing sweeter than having a tight end that can be a game changer in the passing game, because it opens up so much. Middle of the field, the shallow crossers, the shallow stuff out to the flats. You're talking about, stuff that you hit down the seams. Some of those easy button throws a lot of time get made easier when you have a tight end of this caliber. So hopefully Oklahoma can fend off Ohio State and, prevent a team like Oregon from being a thorn in their side, like they've been at times over the last few years, whether it was, the Ashton Cozart flip or, the Zadavian Sims poaching from Oklahoma. It's an important battle to follow over the next, however many months until Nate Roberts' commitment and then signature.
No doubt. Yeah, it's one of the big ones in this 25 cycle for Oklahoma. And again, because it's an in-state guy that you have family ties with, that sort of ratchets it up a little bit more. If Oklahoma sees Devon Mitchell come in and be the guy that sort of he's expected to be, right? If that happens for OU, if Caden McIntyre takes a big step, if Caden Helms takes a legitimate step forward, Bauer Sharp, somebody that has a couple of years of eligibility left, if Devon Mitchell is as advertised and one of those other names mentioned right there, if they come in and show that they've taken leaps and can be legitimate playmakers for Oklahoma, well, then that will cool off, I guess, a little bit of the necessity for Nate Roberts in this class for OU. But if that doesn't happen, and, Devon Mitchell, you're not going to totally freak out if a true freshman doesn't come in and reinvent football in Norman, Oklahoma. You're going to be okay with that. You'll be a little bit more patient. But the other guys, if it doesn't happen there, then I think you're going to see from the fan base that this turns into a recruitment that folks kind of feel one way or another about this Oklahoma class, dependent upon whether or not Oklahoma lands Nate Roberts, depending again with what happens kind of this season with OU. And I don't know. I mean, maybe what Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley do offensively, the tight end was a disappointment for Oklahoma collectively a season ago. So if they could get back to that not being the case, maybe that helps in this recruitment a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot that this season can show a guy like Nate Roberts. Obviously, Jake Roberts being on campus right now is going to give him all the inside intel that he could ever possibly want. What Brent Venables is like, what Seth Luttrell, what Joe John Finley are like, in an even deeper way than what Nate might have gotten on recruiting visits, as he's able to hear from his brother pretty regularly on what this could look like for Nate as he pursues his collegiate options. A couple players that have set their official visits for the Oklahoma Sooners in the 2025 cycle, two pretty impressive top offensive tackle prospects. We'll discuss those guys next, coming up on Locked On Sooners. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventures could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. I've been telling you, I went to Colorado Springs with my wife. We got to rent a Nissan Rogue, and it actually worked out perfectly because we were driving a little bit in the city in Colorado Springs and then had a nice little, windy mountain road drive down dirt roads through the snow in that Nissan Rogue. And it handled every element, every obstacle just perfectly. It's a class. It's got the class exclusive Google built in. It's always updating, and it's available for almost anything that you could need. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. You can also go check out the Nissan Pathfinder, which has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced capable 4x4 capabilities with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. And again, all of our recruiting segments are brought to you by LinkedIn. A couple top targets along the offensive line have set official visits. One is 5-star offensive tackle Ty Haywood. The other 5-star offensive tackle Michael Fasusi. The Oklahoma Sooners are in a great spot for both players. Ty Haywood, most recently, the Sooners received on-3 predictions from one Justin Wells, a Texas insider, and another one from Josh McQuistion of Sooner Scoop, favoring the Oklahoma Sooners. This coming after Ryan Foje, who was kind of an unknown prospect not long ago, and then jumped from 3-star to 4-star to top 80 player, also committed to the Sooners. So Oklahoma's looking to load up along the offensive line, in particular at offensive tackle. So what could it mean, Josh, if the Sooners were able to land Ty Haywood or Michael Fasusi, or maybe even both, as they get set for official visits in the middle of June?
Well, it'd be gigantic. These are the kind of offensive linemen that Oklahoma fans have been clamoring for Bill Bedenbaugh to go find a way to land. They see the track record of development. Oklahoma fans see the success from the transfer portal for Coach Bedenbaugh for Oklahoma, and obviously the contracts that former Sooners that have been coached by Coach Bedenbaugh, what they're making in the National Football League. But what unfortunately Oklahoma fans haven't seen enough of is the 5-star offensive tackle or the 5-star offensive lineman choosing Oklahoma. And in the case of Fasusi and in the case of Haywood, those two guys are that dude. So if you could land either one of them, would be tremendous in this class. There's a lot of people that feel like this cycle sort of resembles the last cycle in terms of the defensive line, not just for Oklahoma, but kind of nationally for a lot of folks, that this is a healthy offensive tackle and offensive line haul in 2025. So you got to get in when the getting's good if you're Oklahoma or any of these blue blood college football programs. So what would it mean for OU? Well, it would mean mission accomplished in a class where it sounds like Fasusi, Haywood, and others, it's offensive tackle rich.
I said it last week as we were discussing the offensive tackle, that this could be what 2024 was along the defensive line. This could be kind of the crown jewel of Oklahoma's recruiting class in 2025 if they're able to get just two of these guys. If you were to get Foje and Haywood or Fasusi, I think you'd feel great about what you've got, in addition to Owen Hollenbeck, the interior offensive line prospect out of Melissa, who's already committed as well. You'd feel pretty great. But the fact that you've got a chance at landing potentially all three of these guys, and I know that there's a prediction out there for Texas favoring the Longhorns in the recruiting battle for Fasusi, but I mean, it sounds like everybody that's still pretty plugged in still feels pretty good about the Sooners in that recruitment. Obviously, you got to continue to recruit and you got to continue to battle it out. But I mean, who better right now? Who's got better recruiting cachet right now at offensive line than Bill Bedenbaugh? You had Anton Harrison going the first round of the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 2023 NFL draft. You've got Tyler Guyton, who's about to go in the first round. Some projections, top 15 in the 2024 NFL draft. And that's just those two guys. But you can throw in, a Walter Rouse, who may or may not have been drafted coming out of Stanford. Had he not transferred to Oklahoma, good chance he's going to get drafted. Andrew Rain, going to get drafted. Just another in a long line of successful draft classes along the offensive line for Bill Bedenbaugh. And so everything is turning up pretty favorable if you're looking at going to the NFL. Now, obviously they're really good, developmental offensive line coaches across the country, but there are few that have as good a track record as Bedenbaugh does during his time at Oklahoma. And I think what we're seeing also is just the transition back to Jerry Schmidt and having a little bit more alignment potentially between Bedenbaugh and Schmidt, and how they kind of view strength and conditioning and how it affects offensive line play. I think that's why we're starting to see not just, again, good offensive lines, but guys that go from a guy like Tyler Guyton, who wasn't playing offensive line just a couple years ago, to becoming a potentially elite offensive line prospect in this next draft, because of not just the offensive line development, but the strength and conditioning development that's occurred with Jerry Schmidt as well.
Well, and in the case of well, to your point real quick, obviously that's gigantic what Oklahoma's been able to do, and that should help with any recruitment when you see guys that come in and go get a big bag of cash, right? Get themselves into the first round of the NFL draft. Oklahoma's done that and will do that in this NFL draft with Guyton. So that helps in these recruitments. But the official visits being set look like a commitment for the most part, or in a number of cases. It doesn't guarantee that somebody's signing with you. A official visit doesn't guarantee that somebody's committing to you. But what does it mean that these guys have set those visits to Oklahoma? Well, I'm going to feel good about Coach Venables and Coach Biedenbow and really just the offensive staff, Seth Luttrell and others, their ability to, if Fasusi is leaning Texas's direction, as at least one individual thinks, or, if you lead for Haywood, but you got to go close it, getting these guys on campus, that gives Oklahoma a great chance to do that. I like Oklahoma with the 10 commits they already have to sort of peer commit, peer recruit a little bit for Oklahoma. So, and these are big time talents. Oklahoma needs to probably find a way to get at least one of them in this 2025 class, just again, based on sort of what the makeup of this recruiting cycle looks like. And at least where we sit today, there's some positive news, it sounds like, for both Fasusi and Haywood. And, oh, by the way, there's some that think, Lamont Rogers is a possibility for Oklahoma, though obviously Missouri and A&M are pretty heavily in the mix right there. But it'll be interesting to watch how the rest of this offensive line class unfolds. And if one of those big names hopefully comes down the board for Oklahoma, I think Foje already is a big-time talent. Hollenbeck, I think, has a chance to be a really good one for OU. But, of course, they need more, right? You need this type of name would really excite the fan base.
Yeah, you can never have too much offensive line play and too much offensive line talent. As we're seeing with the turnover that Oklahoma's experiencing from 2023 to 2024, what we're hoping to do and what I think the Oklahoma coaching staff wants to do is build up the depth enough to where they're not having to go deep into the transfer portal to add 4 to 5 starters for their offensive line from year to year. No, they don't want to have to do that. They want to build it from within, from the recruiting ranks, and this would be a big boon for them if they're able to land. Again, even if they just added one more of Haywood or Fasusi or Rogers, but if they were to add 2 of those names, my goodness, that'd be Bill Biedenbow cooking with gas. So some other potentially good news on the horizon amidst a lot of rumors out there about Porter Moser's future. He kind of squashed those late in the afternoon on Monday. Let's discuss what Porter Moser had to say coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, whether you're betting on a big upset or on that chalk, as they say, a 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all, which you take a peek at the odds right now from FanDuel Sportsbook, the NCAA Tournament National Championship odds. Connecticut is the odds-on favorite to repeat, plus 480. Houston, plus 650. I kind of like Purdue maybe to go on a Virginia-esque response run after being the second #1 seed ever to lose to a 16th seed. They've got plus 750 odds, though Houston before them. I don't mind Kelvin Sampson's bunch at all either. 14-1 for Arizona and Tennessee, 20-1 for Auburn and, the Blue Bloods. North Carolina, 22-1. Duke and Kentucky, 25-1. And let's see, Kansas falling apart a little bit. They're 35-1, a little bit further down that board. But, hey, you can figure out which you like the best. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets.
For several weeks now, it seems that there's been some buzz about Porter Moser's future, especially as Oklahoma continued its up and down trek through Big 12 play. And on Monday, the rumors got even louder that Porter Moser was potentially heading to DePaul. Well, the Oklahoma Sooners head basketball coach got on Twitter and basically said, nah, not happening. I'm not sure where these people are getting their so-called sourced information from, but I've not had any discussions with anybody about any job. We're getting ready to play in the Big 12 tournament. So what do you make of all this, Josh? And I guess we assume that Porter Moser is back for 2024, 2025.
Yeah, I think so. Generally speaking, this maybe is a silly way of looking at it, but this is sort of just how I feel about it. When you stamp on social media that you're not going anywhere, you're probably not going anywhere. We've seen the press conference, rope-a-dope, saw it here not too long ago with a certain head football coach. But just in general, you kind of see that from time to time from coaches where if they get asked a question about, hey, are you interviewing here or there? And maybe they answer the question honestly in some senses, but obviously in a number of different ways are less than forthcoming or transparent or honest in their response, and boom, they go and they take another job. But when Porter Moser jumps on Twitter today or X, formerly known as Twitter, and says, heard all the rumors this afternoon, face palm emoji, and want to say emphatically, there is zero truth. I love Oklahoma and Sooner Nation. Those accounts make stuff up, and there is no validity to any of these sources because I have spoken to no one about any job. At dinner with my team at KC, gearing up for a great Big 12 tournament, LFG Boomer Sooner. So when you're that demonstrative on social media, and this was percolating, I was kind of hearing that from some OU people, not, with the university, but people that cover Oklahoma that, yeah, this thing was close to a done deal. That was bubbling up on Monday. And obviously Porter Moser comes out and by day's end says, no, that is not what's going on. So I'm going to take him at face value, and I'm going to take him to mean that, yeah, he's going to be here and he plans, if things go according to plan, to be in for the long haul at OU, which, look, I like Porter Moser, man. I know it hasn't. I don't think he was dealt the greatest hand to begin with, okay? When Lon Kruger stepped away and with the number of people that transferred, it wasn't a very good roster that Porter inherited. So I don't think that he got a full deck of cards to begin with at OU. Now, look, it is what it is. You got the transfer portal, and it's coaching's not an excuse-making business, right? So it's not, quote-unquote, been good enough to what Oklahoma fans expect or want so far. But, I would imagine he's going to make the NCAA tournament this year. It does seem like he's finally got things started to head in a positive direction. I like Porter. I think he's a very good basketball coach. So from where I'm sitting, I think this is great news for OU that they don't have to go embark on a coaching search, it doesn't look like.
No, and I know a lot of people are out there just thinking, what, or wondering why anybody be excited about Porter Moser returning. Well, just look at the improvement that they've made just in Big 12 play. I mean, they were a 5-win Big 12 team a year ago. They went 8-10 this year. They did have some big wins along the way. I mean, it wasn't smooth sailing through conference play, but it's not really that for very much of anybody. But they showed improvement. The big issue in the 2023 season was a lack of athleticism to be able to play with even teams like Oklahoma State. Well, what did he do? He went into the portal and he got more athletes. Now, what's the big issue? Well, they're not a consistently good enough shooting team to be able to compete at the highest level, but they still won 20 games this year. And again, we're competitive in a lot of games. And so this is a team that is improving. Maybe the development and the results aren't coming as fast as anybody would like, but you got the 20 wins and you've got I still think a pretty good lock to make the NCAA tournament based on your net rating, what you've done in Big 12 play. I think it's going to be, another kind of feather in the cap for Porter Moser. And if they can, build upon that, with, cool attack, a big time power forward, stretch big coming in from Haltom High School, my alma mater, that can add to that coming in the next recruiting class, along with, Forsyth, coming out of the state of Oklahoma, a big time playmaker as well, continue to build upon what he did in this last recruiting cycle, then maybe he can start building towards having more consistency and finding an offensive rhythm that isn't so up and down, because that's really been the biggest issue is, hey man, for stretches, they're about as good as anybody. They can shoot lights out, but then there's other stretches where, man, they go cold. And a lot of times it's cold at the start of games. And so there's some things that he's still got to figure out with this roster and with some of these prospects. And they got to continue to develop guys like Milos Uzan and Atega Owe, Jacob Cole. And as they do that, it'll continue to get better. Obviously, getting out of the Big 12 will also give you a chance to be a better basketball team as well against the SEC. But I think things are improving. The fact that they won 20 games and they don't really have many consistent scoring threats is pretty impressive. Whether it's, Jalen Moore for a night or two, or Rivaldo Soares for a few games, or Javion McCollum here and there, or the one off game from Sam Godwin where he decides he's going to put up 18 points or something like that. It's been a team that hasn't been able to rely on anybody night in, night out because of how inconsistent they shoot the ball. And as they continue to build that, I think that'll get better. But considering what they're dealing with in their offensive limitations, I think he's done a pretty good job.
The other part of this, just from the, if this was ever going to happen thing, you're going to the SEC. You mentioned that gives you a chance, to get out of the Big 12 conference, which looks like it has been, it looks like it will remain. You add Arizona, that just gets the conference stronger. And it looks like it's going to be a great basketball league going forward. I think the SEC is a really good basketball league. Once you add in Oklahoma and Texas, I don't know that it's going to be Big 12 good top to bottom, but I actually think it's going to be, I'm probably more in the way of, I don't know that going from the Big 12 to the SEC is magically this just tonic that fixes all and you're going to win a bunch of basketball games. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to that as much as others do, but having said that, the OU versus DePaul thing, the job that was rumored around out there and got all this smoke, just from a, why would you leave OU to go to DePaul standpoint? It's been a lousy job. Nobody's won there for a long, long time. And Oklahoma's Oklahoma. I know that you got to deal with you're not OU football and it's not a basketball school in name, image, and likeness. You're not at the top of the food chain in that regard. I get there's some challenges with the OU gig, but you still get to recruit to Oklahoma. You play in the SEC versus DePaul. I mean, to me, the only allure there is, okay, Porter Moser's a Chicago guy and he gets to go back home and you're the big fish in the pond or whatever. Maybe that helps a little bit from a name, image, likeness standpoint. But at some point, don't guys kind of look at it and say, yeah, I'd rather go play for insert Power 5 school. And okay, DePaul's in the Big East, right? But I mean, DePaul's not thought of in the same way that in Oklahoma or a number of other Power 4 conference programs are thought of. So to me, it never probably made a ton of sense to begin with. The job that he was getting floated around for, if you're going to leave Oklahoma, I mean, that's probably not the one you'd want to take, I wouldn't think. But anyways, that's a long way to say that I'm happy that he's sticking around, it sounds like.
Oklahoma may not be a basketball blue blood, but they're still a pretty good program, dating back several decades, going back into the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. You've got big time NBA talent that's come through Oklahoma with Trae Young and Blake Griffin and Buddy Hield. I cannot pronounce anything tonight. It is a struggle bus. Everybody, sorry. And so it just does not make sense to take that kind of a step down unless just being close to home is the most important thing that mattered. But I don't think that that's the case for Porter Moser. So sticking around, it sounds like, based on his tweet, it's pretty emphatic. He's going to be with the Oklahoma Sooners for the long haul. And what we've seen from Joe Castiglione is patience. I know a lot of people wanted to throw Porter Moser on the hot seat for a lot of this season. But again, it's an improving team. They've improved from what they were in year one under Moser to now, and they'll continue to improve. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on every platform and on YouTube. Hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on X or Twitter at Josh on Ref. Listen to him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the Care of Sports app, and check him out covering and calling Oklahoma baseball this season. Follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at thesoonerswire.com. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.